So pointers, once again, are variables that can hold an address. And they work nice because they tie right into arrays and some other things. But when you move on to CPS 162, pointers are going to become huge. Like that'll be an everyday word with what you're doing in that class. Between arrays and pointers, it's a big part of the class. But as you know, one of the things we can do is, let me start up at the top, is compare pointers. If I wanted to compare addresses, addresses are actually ordered numerically. Remember, we said they are represented in hexadecimal. But when it comes down to it, if for some reason I needed to, and I don't know why, I would be able to use the relational operators to be able to compare the addresses. So if I was writing a book for dummies or an intro book, that's something I wouldn't include because I don't think it's something you need to know, and that's quite the higher level thinking. That was section 9.6. Section 9.7, a lot of you got into this, was how do I use a pointer as a function parameter? I want to put it in my parameter list. I have an argument coming over that's an address, but I want to be able to use it as a pointer when I actually write the function. Well, taking a quick look, kind of reviewish, is the first program I asked you to write, you had to write with arrays. And say you went and you grabbed the bubble sort, and my prototype for bubble sort was void bubble sort, yada, yada, yada. Then when I called bubble sort, I had the array name, okay, because it's an array I'm passing in, but this is just the address that's going, but everything's tied in there. It knows when I get there and I start moving that +1, which some of you don't like, it knows it's moving 4 bytes at a time, not 1 byte. So it's moving by 4. And I'm also sending in the size. So I know what size that array may have been. Some other things that when I actually called the method and I declared the method heading looks something like void bubble sort, an int array. I'm calling it array inside of my method, function, okay, and then size. So these were like 3 important lines when you were dealing with arrays. You got some of it back in 121, and you got some of it in the beginning of this chapter 9. So now by comparison, how does this look if I want to be setting up a function to deal with pointers instead of array names? So I may be writing something like void bubble sort. Instead of int an array, I'm going to just use the asterisk to know that there's an address coming in. Still have the size. When I come down here might be the name values. Okay, I know it's going to be an array, but I have a pointer set to it and so forth. And then finally, void bubble sort int, a pointer that I'm going to call array so that I can get that memory location and go from there. So inside of here, I could be using that whole +1, +2, +3. Okay, a lot of you got into that in class last Thursday, and here it is again, maybe sort of like a refresher or a reviewer. Again, this is telling me it's a pointer to an int. This is telling me it's a pointer to an int that I'm going to call an array that I can move through. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to come over here to the top, and we're not going to write the program yet. What I'm going to do is put you in groups, and I want you to prepare a 1-page, and I don't want to call it cheat sheet. That's probably not the best name, but it's that 1-page review sheet, study sheet, whatever name you want to give that, summary sheet. What would you put on if I said, oh, you're allowed to use a 3x5 card both sides, and I'm sure you'd write as super small as possible, but it's a way of reviewing that a lot of folks don't necessarily do in programming classes. They don't prep a test that way. They don't revise it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you into groups, and I want to see what you think you would put on one 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. Somebody can do the typing on it to see what you think the highlights are and what the important parts are to get ready for the test for chapter 7 to 9. Once I'm going to give you about 15 minutes on this, then I'm going to come back and we'll take a look at what some of each of the groups have. I'll continue that with the recording. And then I'm going to have you do another program with pointers. Hopefully it'll make it a little easier than what we did last Thursday, because I think the more you practice it, the better off you're going to be. So I'm pausing the video. So I took this page and I divided it into 3, and maybe this is something that when you're doing your notes, I need to write that down so I can have it ready to study for a test. In chapter 7, one of the highlights was when I dealt with a 2-dimensional array, I had to pass that subscript value. It was a little different than what we had seen before. When you got into searching and sorting, the searching, there were 3 different ones. There was the selection sort. That's where I selected like the lowest value and moved it to the front, and then went over one, looked at the rest, selected a value, moved it. The exchange, that was the bubble sort. That was the Dan sort where we did the swap. We had a lot going on with swap. Finally, the insertion sort, that was like a deck of cards where I picked one and I moved it in. I'm high on chapter 9 right now because that was the last 2 days. We talked about pointers and had something like int x equals 25. If I put the ampersand in front, that gives me the address. If I declare a pointer, I can set it to null pointer if I want. Pointer gets the address of x, and I can be making little notes. When I want to go to that address and change the value, it dereferences it. And again, square blocks help me out a lot, trying to keep different things in the chapters organized. Down here, I created an integer array. I can say asterisk num. What's that 5? What's that line of code do right there? Goes up and makes that 1 a 5, doesn't it? What does asterisk num plus 1 equals 6 do? Turns that 2 into a 6. Oh, I remember there was a program where I did num plus plus, and it actually moved me over 4 bytes. Or we did the num plus 1 kind of deal. I started looking at what if I wanted to call something called get num. I can use pointers like reference variables. I can say when that's my prototype, when I called in the main get num ampersand number, and then when I have my function heading, I'm going to say int, hey, there's an address, a pointer coming in here, right? This says it's an int pointer. That says it's an int pointer. Okay, this says it, all right? And it worked a little bit like a reference variable when I just worked with a single address. And then I had some stuff on the paper today, pointers versus arrays and how we passed them in. So my curiosity has always been, do you just rely on what you know walking into a test, or are you making highlight notes, especially stuff that you don't know? Nice mayo. Good job, CJ. Trying to distract me, right? Yeah. So then you got, what are you studying for a test? Are you studying those review questions and so on? So this is just, once in a while, advice from me. Some people aren't paying attention. They're doing backgrounds with mayonnaise. Others are like, oh, I like this idea. Maybe that's what I should start to do. Now I have this ready to look over the night before a test. It's like they say for final exams, you shouldn't start studying for a final exam 3 days before the final. You should be studying for a final exam all semester. This is one of those things, studying for that final exam. I apologize, my handwriting is a little sloppy, but that's kind of what we got going on. Okay, that was one. The last thing we're going to do in a group is I'm going to give you a problem, and I'm going to put you back to what was the mode high temperature for last year? Some of you remember my 121 class, finding the mode, how you did it. The mode is the most frequent occurrence. Okay, it's the most frequent occurrence. The mean is the average. Okay, And then, of course, the median is the middle, but you don't have to worry about the median. So what I want you to do is, and this is going to be done with pointers, I want you to write a program that tells me what was the mode high temperature for last year. And if you have time, it would be awesome to add one more function in there that finds the average. So I want you to have at least one function in this program, one for the mode, and if you have time, one for the average, so that you're passing in and everything, and tell me what the mode was. So here's a problem. I don't have a data file for you. So somebody in your group is going to have to go and figure out how to create a data, unless you want to hand type in all 365 high temperatures for last year. Somebody in your group may have to go and, you may have to break this up a little bit once you get into your groups of 4 and go and find out. One of the things I would do is I might create a data file that has the temperature 1 in, first of all. Then I might try one that has 1, 3, 5, 3, and 5. Because here, what's the mode? Should be 1. Here, what's the mode? 3 and 5. It would be both of them. Okay? 1, 3, 5, 3, 5, 3. Some simple things before you actually fire up your 365 temperatures to see what you got.